Mom, Dad, I've decided to come home for the blind dates you mentioned. I'll be back by the end of the month. In the early spring, with the lingering chill of winter in the air, Valerie Stonecutter pushed open the door while speaking softly into the phone. Her gentle voice drifted through the rain like a thread weaving through the mist. Pulling her collar tighter against the cold, she heard her parents breathe a sigh of relief on the other end. Val, her father began, his voice heavy with age. Your mom and I haven't been in good health these past few years. So now that you've made up your mind, that's good. When you're back, I'll have your Aunt Laura arrange a few suitable candidates for you to meet. Hearing that her parents were already making arrangements for her future, Valerie's gaze flickered, her emotions momentarily unsettled. After a few more words of small talk, she ended the call. She glanced around her home with a heavy heart, her thoughts tangled in a quiet storm. Then she retreated to her bedroom and began to pack. In the drawer lay a thick stack of love letters, albums of candid photos hidden in the cabinet, and journals filled with years of musings. Every single piece centered on one person, a man named Dominic Parker. Without hesitation, she threw them all into a box, carried it downstairs, and set it all aflame. Orange flames flickered and danced, crackling softly in the damp air. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie. She instinctively raised her head and saw him, Dominic. He stood tall, dressed impeccably in his pilot uniform, his figure striking against the muted backdrop. He had just returned from a flight. Seeing her by the fire, his lips curved in the faintest smile. "What are you burning?" he asked, his voice calm yet curious. He bent down, picked up a half-burned pink letter, and raised an eyebrow. "Love letters? You wrote love letters. Who were they for?" Valerie froze and stared at him. She opened her mouth to reply, but before she could speak, he chuckled and tossed the letter back into the flames. Then, with a casual gesture, he ruffled her hair. "All right, just teasing you. Why are you so serious?" he said, his tone light. "I don't mind your past, and I won't dig into it either. Once you're done burning this, you should get inside. It's cold out here." He didn't linger. He turned and made for the elevator. As his figure disappeared behind the closing doors, Valerie dropped her gaze and a faint, bitter smile twisted her lips. Did he truly not mind, or did he simply not care? Her name was written right there on the envelope, along with his own. If he had bothered to look closely, he would have seen it. But in the end, he chose to throw it into the fire. She had loved her boyfriend in secret for 10 long years. And yet, he had no idea. At 15, because of her excellent academic achievements, Valerie had been accepted into a prestigious high school in the city. She was an ordinary girl, plain and unassuming. She didn't know how to dress up and had little presence, an invisible figure in the crowd. Dominic had been her classmate. He was like a bright moon in the night sky, untouchable in his brilliance. With his extraordinary family background and striking good looks, he was someone she could only admire from afar. The first time she met him was on the first day of school. She had boarded the bus only to realize her transit card was missing. The students in line behind her started grumbling impatiently. "If you don't have money, walk," one sneered. "It's bad enough you're holding up the line, and then wearing such a ridiculous dress." "Seriously, what an eyesore," said another. Their words burned her ears, and her face flushed with humiliation. Just as she was about to step off the bus, a pair of slender hands reached out from the front and swiped a card for her fare. Startled, she looked up in gratitude at a face so striking it felt unreal, but her words caught in her throat. Her cheeks grew hotter, and she stammered awkwardly, Thank you. My name is Valerie. May I know which class you're in? I'll pay you back." His voice was deep and pleasant, but his reply was distant. "No need for that." Later, she learned that his name was Dominic. He was the most popular student at Person High School, its legendary campus heartthrob. Not surprisingly, he also had a notorious reputation as a player, changing girlfriends every 3 days. From that day on, her eyes couldn't help but follow him every time he entered a room. She noticed how his desk overflowed with love letters, yet it didn't stop her from writing her own, pouring her growing affection into the words under the faint glow of her desk lamp. She knew he liked girls who were both beautiful and accomplished, so she pushed herself relentlessly. She studied harder, lost weight, learned how to apply makeup, and worked to shed her timid, self-doubting demeanor. She strived to become better, not only for herself but to be someone worthy of standing by his side. Finally, they were admitted to the same university. By then, her transformation was so complete that Dominic finally noticed her. In their sophomore year, he approached her. He didn't recognize her as his high school classmate, but he smiled and asked casually, "Want to be my girlfriend?" Her chest tightened, and she fought back the urge to cry. With trembling hands and a pounding heart, she nodded and said yes. She became his 78th girlfriend, and his last. After getting together with her, Dominic didn't break up after 3 days like he did with the other girls. Instead, he stayed, committing to a serious relationship that lasted 6 years. Everyone said he had finally fallen for someone, that the notorious heartbreaker had changed his ways. Valerie believed it too. She thought she had finally won the love she had chased for so long. There were countless nights where she lay beside him and watched his sleeping face, her heart brimming with quiet joy. But 3 days ago, everything fell apart. Dominic had been drinking, so she went to pick him up. She didn't expect to overhear his drunken conversation with his friends. One of them, slinging an arm around his shoulder, teased, "Well, Dom, you've been with this girl for 6 years. Isn't it time to call it quits?" Dominic's voice was hoarse, thick with alcohol. "Not yet," he slurred. "She'd think I'm not patient enough." The friend laughed and added, "You're still hung up on Camilla Baldwin, huh? Back in the day, when you confessed to her and she turned you down, you just lost it. You turned into a player, cycling through girlfriends every 3 days, trying to forget her. And when she came crawling back but said you weren't dependable enough, she told you to try a long-term relationship to prove her wrong. So you randomly picked someone and stuck it out for 6 years. Man, she's got you wrapped around her finger." The room was noisy, filled with laughter and drunken banter. No one noticed Valerie standing outside the door, frozen to the spot, her heart sinking into an icy abyss. She had heard Camilla's name before, a girl from the neighboring high school. But she had never imagined that Dominic's heart had always belonged to her. She had never imagined that she was nothing more than a tool in his grand display of devotion. Her youth, her 10 years of love and longing, collapsed at that moment. The young girl who had once blushed severely at the thought of him could never sway the heart of the boy she adored. The person who had kept her tied to the past, to her endless yearning, had never once turned back to truly see her. That night, she finally understood. She decided to let him go. That's when she agreed to her family's plans. "Today marks 10 years since I first fell for you, Dominic. It's also the first day I decided not to love you anymore." After burning everything, Valerie didn't return to her apartment immediately. Instead, she sat on a bench outside for what felt like an eternity. By the time she returned, Dominic was already asleep. But his phone, resting on the bedside table, vibrated incessantly. She walked over to silence it but accidentally opened his WhatsApp messages. The screen flooded with chat logs between him and Camilla. "What a coincidence," one message read. "I didn't expect to end up on your flight this time. The carefree rebel has become a calm and composed pilot. I'm impressed." Dominic's reply had been delayed, but it came nonetheless. "Do you really not know why I became a pilot?" Camilla responded with a playful sticker and replied, "Could it be because of me? Just because I once said I liked boys in pilot uniforms?" Dominic's reply consisted of a single word, a word sharp enough to shatter Valerie's heart entirely. "Yes." Her eyes reddened and tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She hastily wiped them away and exited the chat. As she did, her gaze fell upon the bold, unmistakable pinned conversation at the top of his list. It was Camilla's. Directly below it was her own chat window. It bore a label too, "Do not disturb." Love and indifference, separated by just one word, felt like a chasm as vast as heaven and earth. But it didn't matter anymore. She had already let go. He had finally reunited with the one he loved, and Valerie was ready to embark on a new chapter of her life. Both had gotten what they wished for, a perfect resolution for both. The next morning, Valerie woke to the sound of her alarm, only to find that Dominic had already left. He hadn't mentioned where he was going, but she knew, he was meeting Camilla. After all, the night before, Camilla had casually mentioned craving croissants at a cafe near their alma mater. Dominic had immediately booked a table through an app. Valerie pushed the thought aside. She had her own plans to follow. After breakfast, she applied light makeup, grabbed her bag, and headed to her workplace. By midday, she had completed her resignation formalities. At lunch, she met with a few of her university roommates for a farewell meal. The women all knew about her decade-long unrequited love. When they heard she planned to break up with Dominic and return home to explore other romantic prospects, they couldn't help but sigh over the years she had wasted. Are you really just going to leave without saying a word? Don't you feel wronged? Won't you tell him everything, all the ways you've silently loved him over the years? Exactly. You like him so much. Are you sure you don't want to fight for him one last time? If you tell him, he might stop you. 10 years, no heart, no matter how cold, could remain unmoved. Honestly, Dominic was a jerk in this whole thing, but the truth is, you're the one who's been with him for many years. That other girl has been abroad for ages. Maybe she's just a youthful obsession to him now. Valerie knew their words came from a place of concern and regret. But her decision was final. She wasn't interested in empty gestures or futile efforts. With a soft shake of her head, she dismissed their suggestions. He doesn't love me. Telling him would be meaningless. It's better to end things cleanly and leave with dignity. Seeing her resolute stance, her friends had no choice but to wish her well in finding someone better. The group talked for over an hour before finally parting ways. After finishing her last glass of wine, Valerie returned home, still feeling energized. Taking advantage of the good weather, she began clearing out everything she had accumulated over the years. Couple-themed clothes and mugs, a cabinet overflowing with plushies, the razor in the bathroom, the array of cosmetics crowding her vanity, one by one, all the items she had carefully chosen and brought into her life were now tossed into the trash. The once cozy bedroom, kitchen, and living room were gradually emptied, left desolate and cold. But Valerie understood that once she left, these vacant spaces would soon be filled with new belongings. They would all belong to someone else, Camilla, the new mistress of the house. For the next few days, Dominic didn't return home, nor did he send a single message. Valerie didn't care where he had gone. She continued packing her belongings at a steady pace, undisturbed. On Friday, her birthday, Valerie went out to order a cake and bought herself a bouquet of fresh flowers. She had just arranged the flowers in a vase when her phone buzzed with a call from Dominic. Hey, I'm outside your office. Your coworkers told me you resigned. What happened? A flicker of surprise crossed her face. In all their years together, Dominic had never come to pick her up from work. Although she couldn't fathom what had prompted the sudden change, she had no intention of revealing the true reason for her resignation. I've just been feeling too exhausted lately. I thought I'd take some time off to rest. He didn't press her further. Instead, he told her that he would pick her up to take her out. Half an hour later, they met at her doorstep. Valerie climbed into the car. She didn't ask where he was taking her, nor did she inquire about his absence over the past few days. Instead, she quietly gazed out the window at the passing scenery, maintaining a silence that stretched unbroken throughout the drive. When the car came to a halt, Dominic didn't wait for Valerie and walked ahead into the venue. Following closely behind, Valerie stepped inside and immediately realized it was a birthday party. However, she was not the guest of honor. Standing in the spotlight at the center of the stage, surrounded by admirers, was Camilla. In an instant, Valerie understood that she was the true protagonist of this event. Draped in an exquisite haute couture gown, Camilla exuded elegance. A custom diamond necklace accentuated her long, graceful neck, while her pearl earrings glittered under the chandelier light. It was impossible to look away. Valerie's gaze lingered on the jewelry for a long time. She knew the pieces all too well, not because she had worn them but because they had been sitting in Dominic's display case for ages. In her naivety, before she knew the truth, she had assumed those items were gifts he had prepared for her. For years, she had anticipated their arrival with quiet hope. But as time passed, year after year, those gifts never materialized. Eventually, she stopped waiting, letting her yearning fade into the background. Now, seeing Camilla adorned with them, the truth became painfully clear: those treasures had always been meant for someone else. Noticing her gaze, Camilla lifted the hem of her gown and gracefully approached, her lips forming a gentle smile. Dom, is this the woman you've been seeing these past few years? The one you promised to introduce me to? Her tone was warm, but her words were laced with subtle condescension. She's beautiful. No wonder she managed to capture the heart of our school's most sought-after bachelor. So that was it, Camilla had asked to meet her. No wonder Dominic had uncharacteristically brought her along that night. Realizing his intentions, Valerie let out a quiet, bitter laugh, mocking herself for expecting otherwise. A few of Dominic's friends noticed the situation and sauntered over, their voices brimming with indignation as they spoke up for him. That's right. Dom's been nothing but devoted and obedient. Hopefully, some people will stop with these bizarre tests and start keeping their promises. These days, finding someone who truly cares is rare. When you have that, you hold on to it. Mess it up, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life. The group voiced their support for Dominic, assuming Valerie wouldn't catch the veiled jabs. She didn't react, as they had expected, her face betraying no emotion. Instead, she casually found a seat and quietly played the part of the clueless, ornamental girlfriend. All evening, Valerie stayed rooted in her seat, silently observing Dominic as he lingered beside Camilla. The man who usually despised socializing now stood by Camilla's side, chatting with her circle of affluent friends. The man who showed no interest in anything remembered Camilla's likes and dislikes, even stepping in to shield her from drinks she didn't want. The man who never got jealous in her presence now darkened with displeasure just because Camilla shook hands with another man. In just a few short hours, Valerie witnessed what Dominic looked like when he cared for someone deeply, in a way he couldn't hide. After 6 years together, she finally saw how he acted when he was in love. As the centerpiece of the evening, Camilla had her birthday song sung to her, and the crowd eagerly gathered to present her with gifts. Dominic waited until the end to give his, producing the deed to an estate. Warmth softened his usually impassive expression as he spoke. Camilla, you once mentioned wanting a cozy home. So, I'm giving you this, hoping it will fulfill your dream. His friends immediately cheered and egged him on, their excitement spilling over into laughter and teasing. You wouldn't believe it, every single room in that estate was designed by Dom himself. It took 6 years to finish the renovations. I heard the garden in the back is filled with lavender and tulips. Now, whose favorite flowers could those possibly be? A cozy home, if you ask me, needs a man of the house to truly feel warm and complete. Don't you all agree? Camilla's cheeks flushed crimson amid the teasing remarks. She clasped her hands together in a great show of preparing to make a wish. Only then did the laughter fade into silence. In the quiet that followed, Valerie's phone chimed with a few soft notifications. It was a voice message from her father. She intended to convert it into text but accidentally hit play instead. Happy birthday, Valerie. It's almost midnight. Did you have your cake yet? The attention previously fixed on Camilla shifted sharply to Valerie. Every pair of eyes was now filled with shock. Even Dominic froze for a few seconds, turning to look at her with a faint frown on his face. Is it your birthday today, Valerie? Valerie's face remained calm, devoid of emotion, as she gave a small, quiet nod. In previous years, Dominic would at least ask about the date in advance and prepare a gift. But this year, with Camilla's birthday coinciding with hers, it was as if Valerie had completely slipped his mind, a fact that, in hindsight, didn't seem surprising. No one had anticipated such a coincidence. The room fell into an awkward silence, with everyone exchanging uneasy glances. It was Camilla who eventually smoothed things over. She gently took Valerie's hand and led her toward the cake, lighting a single candle herself. Well, since it's such a lucky coincidence, let's celebrate together. Make a wish, Valerie. Valerie didn't refuse. She closed her eyes and made her wish in silence. When she opened them again, Dominic, perhaps trying to dispel the lingering awkwardness, casually asked, "What did you wish for? Is there any gift you'd like?" Valerie looked at him for a moment, her gaze calm yet distant. Then, in a steady voice, she answered, "I wish that I'd get married this year." When the words left her lips, the entire hall fell silent. Camilla broke the stillness with a laugh. She turned toward Dominic, her voice light. Well, Dom, it seems your girlfriend is quite eager for you to fulfill her wish this year. You'd better hurry up. And when it happens, don't forget to invite me to the wedding banquet. Dominic's stunned expression darkened as the weight of her words sank in. Valerie noticed his rising anger and instinctively moved to explain herself, but he cut her off sharply. Do you think this is funny, Camilla? What will it take for you to stop? Do you really want to push me to my breaking point? His accusations, tinged with anger, weren't directed at Valerie. They were aimed squarely at Camilla. The frustration in his tone and the emotions flickering across his face, grief, indignation, and helplessness, made his feelings all too clear. He wasn't angry about the moment. He was furious at Camilla's feigned ignorance and the way she trampled over his unspoken emotions yet again. The atmosphere in the hall had gone ice cold. In a fit of rage, Dominic kicked over a chair, grabbed his car keys, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. What had started as a celebratory birthday party had now ended in utter disarray. As the remaining guests began murmuring to each other, shrugging off the tension, and trickling out of the venue, Valerie lowered her gaze. She grabbed her purse and quietly excused herself. When she stepped back into the corridor, the guests were gone, but the faint echoes of a heated argument reverberated from the far end of the hallway. You've gone too far today, Camilla. Do you have any idea how hard Dom prepared for your birthday party? Why did you have to ruin his efforts and say those things to provoke him in front of everyone? Was I not telling the truth? His girlfriend wants to get married. If it's not him, who else would it be? Damn it. Do you think this is funny? Dom has always loved you. Ever since you rejected him back then, you shattered him so completely that he turned into some reckless, aimless playboy. And then, the moment you beckoned him back, he came running to you again. But when you said he lacked loyalty, he went and found this rebound girlfriend just to please you. What more do you want? His sincerity doesn't deserve to be trampled on like this. So what? I've never seen someone so infatuated like him before. I just wanted to see how far he'd go for me. He's doing it willingly, why are you so worked up about it? It was Camilla arguing with one of Dominic's closest friends. Valerie hadn't intended to eavesdrop on their private conversation, but she couldn't stop her thoughts from wandering. If Dominic overheard those words, what kind of expression would he wear? Would it break his heart? Would he ache as she did when she discovered the truth, a pain so deep she felt like dying? Between her and Dominic, he always held the reins. As long as he showed even a shred of care, her emotions would spiral in response. But between Dominic and Camilla, he was the powerless one. A single careless word from her, a mere hint of her indifference, and he would crumble completely. After all, betrayal will never go unpunished. Valerie turned away and descended the stairs from the far side of the hall, choosing a quieter path. Back home, Valerie picked up the cake that had been left by the door and gave herself a quiet birthday celebration. It was a 6-inch cake, but she ate half before heading to bed. The next day, she was startled awake by a knock at the door. Rubbing her eyes, she shuffled over to answer it. It was Dominic. After just one night apart, his expression still carried traces of lingering anger, his face shadowed with frustration. Yet, when his gaze met hers, he forced a strained smile and pulled a diamond bracelet from his pocket. Happy birthday. This is your gift. I drank too much yesterday and forgot to give it to you. Valerie took one glance at the bracelet and instantly recognized it. It was the matching set to the diamond necklace Camilla had worn the night before. She couldn't help but think that he was merely repurposing something Camilla didn't like, passing it off to her as a convenient solution to avoid the effort of picking out a gift. Wasn't that a fair assumption? Dominic mistook her silence for dissatisfaction. He quickly added, "You don't like it? Then just buy whatever you want and put it on my card." Valerie shook her head, reached out to take the bracelet, and casually set it down on the entryway table. "It's fine. I like it. No need for anything else." Dominic did not ask any further. He casually removed his coat and placed it on the sofa. His gaze fell on the cake on the table, and he paused, his eyes lingering there for a moment. "Yesterday, the birthday wish you made was He began hesitantly. Looking at the probing in his eyes, Valerie replied lightly, well, since no one knew it was my birthday, it was a bit awkward, so I just made a joke. I didn't expect everyone to take it that way. Sorry about that. Dominic sighed in relief. So what was your real wish? I hoped for my mom and dad to have good health and for all their dreams to come true. It was a simple and heartfelt wish. Dominic felt a soft tug at his heart. He reached out to lightly rub her nose with his hand and gave her a small smile. You're so filial. Your wish will surely come true. Valerie agreed with the sentiment. She would find success in marriage. She would stay by her parents' side and care for them until they grew old. For the next few days, Dominic seldom left the house. During this time, he noticed that many things had gone missing from the house and brought it up several times. Where did the couple mugs you bought go? They broke a few days ago. That tie you gave me, where is it now? I'm not sure. It probably got blown away when I hung it out to dry. These were trivial, insignificant items, and Dominic didn't pay much attention to them. Valerie always brushed off his questions with excuses, offering her reasons before quietly compiling a long list of must-try local foods and snacks to enjoy before leaving the city. Over the years, she had adopted a strict vegetarian diet to maintain her figure, and she hadn't truly indulged in a feast without restraint for a long time. Her efforts to preserve her appearance hadn't brought her the kind of love she had hoped for. Dominic didn't like her, no matter if she was beautiful or plain, overweight or slim, with makeup or without. The beauty she had sacrificed her health to maintain amounted to nothing in his eyes, and even less in Camilla's. The birthday cake had awakened a suppressed hunger within her, and it brought clarity to her. She came to realize that happiness wasn't only about romantic love. Food, flowers, the care of friends, and the concern of family were all essential pieces of life. She shouldn't let one thing blind her to the others. Valerie began going out more often, and Dominic took note of this. He stopped her one afternoon as she prepared to leave. Heading out again? Where to this time? West side of the city. Eating out. Meeting someone? Do you want me to drive you? He asked her casually, his gaze drifting toward the unending downpour outside the window. Valerie shook her head as she bent down to put on her shoes. Not meeting anyone. I want to try some Japanese food. No need to bother, you don't have to drive me. Dominic looked at her in surprise. He remembered that she ate very little at each meal to maintain her weight, so why had she suddenly developed such an appetite recently? But it would be good if she ate more. She was too thin. At the thought, he realized he had nothing to do that afternoon. He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked over to her. Come with me. It's raining outside. I'll give you a ride. Valerie hadn't expected him to say that. She paused, momentarily startled. The rain continued to fall harder, and the streets were almost empty. The ground was slick, and Dominic gripped the steering wheel tightly, instructing Valerie to take his phone out and plug it into charge. She followed his instructions, and as soon as she connected the charger, the screen lit up with an unread message. Hey, Dom, bar gathering tonight. Are you coming? Cam's here too. Valerie glanced at the message and was about to pretend she hadn't seen it when she heard Dominic's voice. Reject it. Just say I'm taking you to try Japanese food and we're busy. She turned her head slightly and caught the fleeting displeasure that showed on his face. Valerie understood. She quickly typed a reply, sent the message, and just as she did, the phone rang. It was Camilla. Dominic saw the caller ID, and the corner of his lips instinctively twitched, though he hesitated about whether to answer it. After several seconds, he finally pulled up at the roadside and took the phone. I already told you. Dom, a group of guys just asked for my contact info. They were touching and harassing me, and I was so angry that I threw a bottle at them. Now they've trapped me in the bar. Come get me, please. The moment he heard that frantic, tearful voice, Dominic's face turned dark. He slammed his foot on the gas, twisted the steering wheel, and executed a sharp turn. Unprepared, Valerie was thrown against the car door, her forehead struck by a flying ornament, which tore a gash into her skin. Blood streamed down her face as she cried out in pain, clutching the wound with a hand and looking at him in bewilderment. He hadn't even noticed that she was injured. His focus was entirely on getting to Camilla. His eyes were alight with barely contained fury, though his voice was steady. "Don't be afraid. Where are you now? Don't hang up, I'll be there in 5 minutes." All the questions she had been about to ask froze on her lips at his words. She pulled out some tissues from her bag and pressed them against the bleeding wound. The GPS repeatedly warned them of speeding, but Dominic ignored it, running through red lights without hesitation. Seeing how fast they were going, Valerie adjusted her seatbelt. 5 minutes later, the car skidded to a stop in front of a bar. It seemed as though Dominic had forgotten she was even in the car. He tore off his seatbelt and sprinted away. Valerie hesitated before following him. As soon as she entered the bar, she saw the shattered tables scattered across the lobby and immediately sensed something was wrong. The sounds of shouting and fighting came from the second floor. She climbed the stairs and found herself in the middle of chaos, with 2 groups shoving and yelling at each other. Near the entrance to the private room stood Dominic and 4 or 5 of his friends, having just arrived. The man on the other side was someone Valerie recognized, Nate Thatcher, a well-known rival in their social circle and a long-standing adversary of Dominic. Dominic had the perfect appearance and a good personality. From childhood, he had always excelled in everything he did. His love life, however, had its share of chaos as no heir from a wealthy family led a completely disciplined life. His privileges and charms had earned him admiration from all the other socialites and heirs, making him the envy of many. In contrast, Nate was everything Dominic was not. He was reckless, extravagant, and infamous for his wild lifestyle. He was the poison in their social circle, a troublemaker through and through. His disdain for Dominic's success had turned into relentless rivalry over time. Dominic, however, ignored him at every turn, which only seemed to deepen Nate's resentment of him. After having harassed Camilla, Nate thought it was the perfect opportunity to settle the score. With 10 or so of his own men, Nate and his crew had completely surrounded the private room. His blood-soaked hand continued to drip with crimson through his wrappings and his dark eyes radiated menace. "The surveillance footage shows everything, Dominic. It's clear that you made the first move. What? You're trying to twist the truth and protect yourself? You think you can get away with this?" Dominic's lips twisted into a cold smirk as he drew Camilla into his arms. His voice was calm but sharp. "You want compensation? Name your price." Seeing how much Dominic cared, Nate smiled mockingly, his eyes gleaming with menace. "Compensation?" She smashed my hand to the point of nearly breaking it. "Of course, I'm going to the police. I'll file a lawsuit if I have to, and if necessary, she'll sit in jail." The expressions on Dominic and his men grew tense. Dominic's brow twitched as veins bulged on his forehead. His fury was barely held in check. "This is such a minor thing. Do you really need to escalate this? Picking on a girl, what's the point? If you want to cause trouble, then come at me," he said through gritted teeth. It was exactly the response Nate had been waiting for. He signaled to one of his underlings to grab the fruit knife from the table. His voice dripped with malice. "Fine. I won't make this difficult for you. She destroyed my hand, so you'll lose one hand too. That way, we'll be even." Before the effect of his words had fully settled, the sharp blade of the fruit knife plunged into the door with a swift motion. Several of Dominic's friends immediately shielded him, their faces furious as they glared at Nate. "Look, we're all part of the same social circle. Don't push it too far." Despite their words, no one knew better than Dominic just how serious the situation had become. Nate had injured his hand that day. Even if things could be temporarily smoothed over, Dominic knew that Nate's hatred ran deep. He would find every possible way to retaliate, sooner or later. If Nate couldn't directly target him, he would attack his weak spot. And everyone knew that Camilla was his weak spot. Although Dominic could protect Camilla, the world was vast, and there would always be places he couldn't keep watch over her. He couldn't risk Camilla falling into danger in the future. The best solution was to end everything today. Having weighed the stakes and the consequences, Dominic no longer hesitated. He pushed the people beside him away. His friends were shocked. They rushed to grab his hand, trying to stop him from doing something foolish. Dominic. Are you insane? You're a pilot. If you damage your hand, your entire career is over. She's just some woman. Is she really worth it? But his gaze turned colder than ever before as he looked directly at Nate. Are you serious about this? Of course. Dominic yanked the knife out of the door. All the blood drained from Valerie's face. Her heart climbed to her throat, and before she could stop him, Dominic had already shielded the terrified Camilla. She had been crying to the point of fainting and had used his coat to block her view. He spoke in a low, steady voice to comfort her. Don't be afraid. It'll be over soon. With those words, amidst countless shocked gazes, Dominic raised the knife and drove it cleanly into the palm of his right hand. A jet of blood shot out like a geyser, splattering everywhere. It was horrifying to witness. His face paled in an instant, but he clenched his teeth tightly, and let out a muffled groan. He didn't want to frighten Camilla. Through it all, he never once looked at Valerie. Dominic was soon wheeled into the operating room. His family received the news and rushed over. After hearing the full story from a few of Dominic's friends, Mrs. Parker grew so angry that she smashed the beaded bracelet on her wrist. He's maimed his right hand for a woman he's been obsessed with for years. I think he's gone crazy. Dominic's friends hurriedly stepped in to calm the parents, saying anything they could think of. Several hours later, the operating room lights turned off. The doctor emerged, pushing Dominic on a gurney, his tone laced with relief. The surgery was successful. With proper care over the next few months, he should be fine. Hearing those words, everyone present let out a collective sigh of relief. Knowing that there would be no lasting consequences, Mr. and Mrs. Parker no longer wanted to see their wayward son. They boarded a flight to attend a meeting that very night. Before leaving, the two thanked the hospital staff and the people who had stayed to assist. However, when they reached the seating area where Valerie was waiting, they simply walked by as if they had not seen her as they thanked the staff on their way out. Watching their retreating figures, Valerie understood everything in an instant. So, Dominic had never told his family about his relationship with her. And of course, why would he, when his relationships were bound to end anyway? Who was there to introduce them to? For the days that Dominic was hospitalized, Valerie stayed by his side and took great care of him. She only managed 4 or 5 hours of sleep each day. Looking at her increasingly haggard face, Dominic softened. I'm fine now. You should get some rest. He forced her to sit down and handed her a glass of water. He didn't explain what had happened that day, as though he struggled with how to put it into words. After a pause, he casually spoke to her. Have many people come to visit? I've been sleeping for so long, did I miss anyone? Camilla. Has she come by? Valerie paused for a moment, her hand holding the glass of water. She looked at him steadily. She knew that of all the questions he had just asked, only the answer to the last question truly mattered to him. Her answer was brief. Everyone's come. Camilla. I think she was traumatized, so she hasn't been here. Dominic frowned deeply, losing any interest in the conversation. He picked up his phone and laboriously began typing on the screen. The continuous WhatsApp notification sounds filled the air. Valerie knew that he was once again concerned about Camilla. She stood up silently, went through the motions of completing the discharge paperwork, and prepared to leave. As soon as the car reached their doorstep and before they could head inside, Dominic's phone rang. It was Camilla. He turned around and left immediately. Looking at the gauze-wrapped hand he held and his hurried steps, Valerie's words caught in her throat. She looked away and turned back toward their apartment. Dominic didn't return for the next 3 days. The closer the date of her departure grew, the calmer Valerie felt. She planned to rest while looking for a job, so she spent her time checking recruitment postings in her hometown. The day before she left, her high school classmates organized a reunion. With nothing to do, she decided to join and add to the lively gathering. After so many years, her old classmates had all changed dramatically. The reunion was filled with nostalgic reminiscing as everyone reflected on how much time had passed. When Valerie walked in, no one could believe that the stunning beauty standing before them was the same girl from 10 years ago, a girl who had been nothing but a bookworm, awkward and out of place. Despite their shock, Valerie appeared completely composed and at ease. After exchanging pleasantries, she joined a few old friends at their table. Once everyone had arrived, the class president stood up to propose a toast when the door suddenly burst open. Dominic walked in with a smile as he greeted everyone. His eyes swept across the room and froze the moment he saw Valerie. "Val, what are you doing here?" Everyone looked as though they had been struck by lightning. Of course she'd be here. We were all high school mates, in the same class, weren't we? Wow, are you really that forgetful? Schoolmate. In the same class? The revelation blew Dominic's mind. He stared at Valerie in shock, his thin lips moving slightly. Was it guilt that he had forgotten her, or confusion as to why she had never told him? Several girls in the group noticed the strangeness and looked at the two with keen curiosity. "Val, you called out to her so affectionately. What's your relationship with her?" Before Valerie could even open her mouth to say just a classmate, Dominic cut her off, his voice steady and resolute. "Valerie is my girlfriend. We've been together for 6 years." The entire room erupted at his words. Everyone buzzed with excitement as they dove into the story of their romance. Dominic hadn't known that she had been his classmate all along, and Valerie hadn't anticipated that he would so openly admit their relationship. A group of people surrounded the two of them, firing questions without pause. Neither of them was comfortable with the attention. Dominic kept drinking to steer the conversation elsewhere, while Valerie took the opportunity to slip away to the restroom. After 3 drinks, the class president, who was slightly drunk, grabbed Dominic's hand and began rambling. "I'm so happy to see you two together. Valerie finally got her wish, you know? She's liked you for a very long time. There was a time during PE class when you were asleep in the classroom. I came back to grab something and saw her shielding you from the sun. That's when I found out. There were so many girls who liked you back then, but only Valerie left the deepest impression on me. When you twisted your leg playing basketball and had your duty shift, she was the one who always covered for you. When you got caught in a fight with a gang and were cornered in an alley, she skipped class to rush to your rescue. When you were being gossiped about by a group of people outside the school, despite being timid, she threw herself into the situation to defend you and even managed to argue with them until her face turned red. You know, that kind of young love is so pure. Seeing you two end up together makes me genuinely happy for her. She's a good girl, Dominic. You'd better treasure her, or you'll regret it." Dominic froze. He had always assumed that they were just casual acquaintances from university, not classmates since high school. And she had secretly harbored feelings for him for an entire decade. He remembered the promise that had led him to hastily start a relationship with her 6 years ago. She still didn't know the truth. A strange, bittersweet emotion welled in his chest, disorienting and painful. He no longer had the courage to meet her gaze, so he simply kept drinking, one glass after another, burying his unease in liquor. After the party broke up, Valerie supported the drunken Dominic as they made their way home. She took a warm towel and approached him, intending to wipe his face. However, he grasped her hand and wouldn't let go, his face full of sorrow and concern. "Are you a fool? Why didn't you tell me?" Valerie knew he must have heard something at the gathering, but she no longer cared. She gently pulled her hand free. "Liking you is my own business. It has nothing to do with you." Dominic, still slightly coherent, heard her words, and an indescribable unease swelled in his chest. He wanted to say something to her but didn't know where to begin. In the end, he stayed silent. The room fell into stillness. He raised his hand to shield his eyes from the glaring light and accidentally exposed the tattoo on his side. It was the initials CB. Every night, when passion brought them close, she would lie in his arms, gaze at the tattoo, and ask him what it meant. He had hesitated, as feelings of fondness and longing washed over him. "It's faith. A faith more important to me than my own life." Back then, Valerie didn't know that the letters represented Camilla Baldwin. Valerie had naively believed his words, accepting them without question. She saw his dreams as her own and adopted his faith, even going as far as to get an identical tattoo. Now, looking back on those memories, Valerie didn't feel pain anymore, only a kind of bittersweet humor. Who hadn't dreamed of being in sync with their beloved, growing old together, hand in hand? But only after getting burned over and over again could she see the truth. Some connections were destined to part from the very beginning. She and Dominic had already reached a fork in the road. Perhaps it was time to say goodbye. The morning after a heavy night of drinking, Dominic's head felt clouded and heavy. He struggled to sit up, washed his face, and followed the enticing aroma drifting from the dining room. When he walked in, he found that Valerie had prepared a table full of food. He glanced at the calendar, noting that it was an ordinary day, which left him slightly puzzled. "Why did you suddenly cook so much?" "Just to celebrate," Valerie said as she set the table, her voice soft and casual. Celebrate? Was she celebrating his recovery? Dominic could only think of that as the reason. But as he looked at the array of fragrant and spicy dishes, he recalled the doctor's advice about a light diet. His initial excitement waned, and a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. He didn't dwell on it, though. As he pulled out a chair to sit, his phone suddenly rang. It was Camilla. After hesitating for a few seconds, he set down the utensils he had just picked up and answered the call. A few minutes later, the call ended. He stood slowly, his gaze drifting back toward Valerie. She had already taken her seat, peeling the shell off a shrimp, her attention focused on her task. It appeared she wasn't particularly concerned about whether he joined her for the meal. But the fact that she had prepared the feast to celebrate gnawed at his conscience. Unable to shake the unease, he cooked up an excuse. "I have something to take care of. You have something to eat first. I'll take you out to celebrate later." "There's no need for that. Just focus on your business," Valerie said, shaking her head. She looked calm and yet it was hard to read her expression. For some inexplicable reason, the moment he met her eyes, his heartbeat quickened, and a strange sense of unease rose in his chest, like an unspoken warning. But what it meant, he couldn't quite figure it out. They stared at each other across the table. Eventually, Dominic turned, breaking the gaze, and left the room. As the door clicked shut, Valerie looked at the empty chair across from her and smiled to herself. What she wanted to celebrate was her freedom, learning to love herself, independent of anyone else. No one else needed to be a part of it. After finishing her meal, she cleaned up the kitchen, gathered the last bit of trash, and took it downstairs to throw it out. She then pulled out her suitcase from the cabinet and left the apartment. She flagged down a cab and headed to the tattoo shop, the same one she had visited years ago. The tattooist recognized her immediately and asked what she wanted this time. She looked at the familiar little shop, her voice soft but resolute. "I want to remove the one I got last time." The tattooist studied her expression and nodded in understanding. He looked slightly regretful at her request. "Removing a tattoo is very painful, miss. Perhaps you'd like to reconsider." Pain? Valerie had already experienced the most desperate, unbearable pain the world could offer. Why would she fear such a slight torment to the skin? She knew that the tattoo carried the weight of her past, a constant reminder. Its removal would be painful, would scar, would tear at her body, but that was part of the healing process. She kept silent and sat in the same spot she had occupied years ago. She lifted her shirt and exposed the tattoo on her side. A sharp, fiery pain shot through her as the process began, searing its way into her mind. She couldn't stop the tears, raw, involuntary, mixing with the sweat on her smiling face. It felt as though a century passed in those moments, but in reality, only seconds had gone by. The tattooist had finished the procedure and handed her a box of tissues. Valerie thanked him before wiping her tears and sweat. She stood, pulling her suitcase with her as she left the small shop. She hailed a cab, pulled out her phone, and sent a message to Dominic. Then she deleted all contact information related to him. The cab had pulled to a stop at the station when she finished. The afternoon sun blazed down on her, hot and unyielding. She took out the train ticket from her pocket and looked back at the city one last time. Then she stepped into the station and never looked